Hi folks, well, there's another little video for you. This is another of my UK legal. It's one of these ones, this one is, it's on the margin. It is UK legal, but it depends who you are. I'm a fat middle-aged cripple, so I suspect I would have relatively little problem with this one, but the blade has to be sub 3 inches to be legal in the UK. And it all depends how you measure it. If you measure it from the end of the handle, you'll find this comes in just north of the 3 inches. But the definition as in the legislation and on the government website says a cutting edge. So if you take the cutting edge, it's just shy of the 3 inches. But there is a third way to measure it, and that is the distance from, if you measure along the cutting edge, you'll find again, it's very difficult to do it, but if you were to sort of run it like that, you'll find it comes in just north of the 3 inches. Now, like I say, as a fat middle-aged cripple, I don't think I'm going to have a problem with this knife out and about in the street. If I get stopped by a policeman, I will state it is what it is, and I will probably be fine. But the chances of me being stopped are a few. But would I lend this knife to my son to take out in his pocket? He's in his 20s. No, I would be inclined to play it safe and go for something a little bit more, say, within the rules. My favourite everyday carry myself is the UK PK, which has a 68mm blade, which is well under the 3 inches, but still of a good usable size. And as what one might use as a size comparator here, I have a Swiss Army knife here. This is one of the slightly larger 93mm handle Alox knives. The standard was 91mm, so we're talking 2mm difference. Or, what's that, an eighth of an inch? No, it's not even an eighth of an inch. 3/16 of an inch, isn't it? Thereabouts. So, there's not a lot of difference. But see, these are well under the 3 inches, and it's relatively non-threatening looking blade. But for a Sodbuster, that's relatively on the large side. I mean, the Bushmaster from that Jody Besant, Big Red EDC sent me, is almost identical in terms of size, but more traditional Sodbusters, or Sodbuster Juniors, I should say, like the Carl Sleeper, which is really, really old design. I'm hammer on about that, I know, but it's true nonetheless. And in some ways, what's nowadays considered the definitive Sodbuster, unfairly in my book, but nonetheless, is the Case. There's actually Sodbuster Junior, but again, it's a name patented or trademarked by Case. Anyway, call this what you like. The Mazarin Scout, for all its modern materials, we've got stone acid washed blade, micarta handles, actually probably has a greater, and it's also held together by screws rather than by pins, has a greater claim perhaps to heritage than Case will ever muster. Case is a 20th century clone, you could say, of the age-old German-Austrian design, the Sodbuster. Mazarin is from Italy, so it's sort of European, that similar part of Europe, a little bit further south, that could claim ownership of this type of design. Now, what have we got here? We've got, as I say, micarta handles, in my case blue. It's available in about 4 different colours, I think. I like this, is it linen micarta? I'm not sure. It's a relatively rough micarta, which wears lovely in the hand. I mean, it really does turn out nice if you own it for a while. It's a stonewash blade. I'm not big on stonewash blades, I must admit. It's not really my cup of tea. I can't see what that says on the ricasso. There's some mark. And on the other side, it says Mazarin. It's got their logo, and steel D2. So D2, just a couple of years back, D2 was possibly seen as relatively exotic. I mean, for example, this knife here, which is the Andre de Villiers Impey, which is, you know, one of the most expensive knives I've got, is the D2 tool steel. So it used to be a common steel. It used to be a fairly expensive, exotic steel. Now it's becoming more common right the way across the range, and certainly a lot of the Chinese knives are using D2. But it doesn't take away from the fact it's a really good steel and it works well. There is this question of apparently it rusts. Well, it probably does if you, you know, I wouldn't want to go to sea with it. Put it that way. You know, even my really quite rust resistant stainless steel rigging knife picks up rust spots in an instant. You have to be constantly at it, to keep some of that off. And you can see that for a long time, I've had this knife a long time, 44 years, 45 years. It's not a surprise. It's been neglected at times and allowed it to get quite rusty, and that pitting is set in and you'll never get it out again. So the same would probably be said of the D2, but as long as you look after it and keep it clean, and you know, when you've got a knife as expensive as the Impey, one does tend to look after it, and if there's marks on it at all, it's actually probably because there's a little bit of oil on there. Anyway, so the Mazarin, it's got a lanyard hole, which is quite useful. It's got a fairly traditional sod-buster blade shape. It's become, you know, there are knives like the Carl Sleeper, which is a bit more bull-nosed in pattern, and the case a little bit more bull-nosed in pattern, but they're all tending towards this kind of slightly drop point shape rather than the drop point bull-nose shape these days. GEC seem to have kept that shape alive. Anyway, this knife came very, very sharp. It's good to use, it works well, feels good in the hand, it's got a decent size to it, nice feel to it. For those traditionalists like me who don't go in for all this jimping and finger trials and stuff, this is just a nice working feel to it. That's why I like the Sodbuster pattern so much. That's why I've got so many of them. I just keep seeing another one that I quite like, and another one that I quite like, and another one, and before you know it, I say I've certainly into double figures. I couldn't say quite how many I've got. One day I'll get them all out and do a video on them all, and there we are. But anyway, yeah, I'm very keen on this. Nice knife, well made, well finished. The fit and finish is, you know, really good. I get annoyed with a lot of traditional European manufacturers for some of their sloppy fit and finish. You know, Carl Sleeper's fit and finish on this was bloody awful. Some of the Sheffield ones are not great, but there are people out there that can do it. Mazarin can do it and do it. Taylor's Eyewitness with some of the knives got lovely fit and finish. I mean, one of the things I really like about this one is the fit and finish at the top there. I mean, it's just lovely. There's a bit of oil in there which spoils it slightly, but you know, it's beautifully flat at the top. Even GEC don't do that. Their knives aren't as neat and tidy in the fold as these are. But no, they can do it, but just a lot of times they don't. Well, this one is an example of ones who can do it and do it. So I'm quite impressed with that. I don't really like the acid watch blade, I've got to say, but I suppose it's nice to have a bit of variety. I would tend to go for a nice polish, if I'm honest, although I do think that a satin finish like this is probably better for everyday use, because it doesn't, you're not constantly wiping finger marks off it. I mean, I just noticed with these 3 polish plates, every one of them's got fingerprints all over it, and I cleaned them all before I started. So there we are. Anyway, I'm waffling a bit, rambling a bit, so I'll shut up. Mazarin Scout, available. I got this one from Heine Haynes. It's about 40 quid in the UK. It's a good quality for the price. It's cheaper than the Carl Sleeper. It's a lot more a lot cheaper than the case, and a lot more expensive than, say, the Schrades or the Bushmaster, which is very comparable in oh so many ways. $5. How can you complain about $5? Eh? It's just a great price for a reasonably good knife, actually. Anyway, there we go. Enough of the waffle. Thank you very much. Bye.